Ex-husband taunted his ex-wife at the reunion banquet until a returning envoy demanded her forgotten title. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main characters. Lindsay Adams never imagined that she would find herself standing in front of Jack Adams at a reunion banquet, a place where old friends and acquaintances gathered to reminisce. It had been years since their divorce, but some wounds had never truly healed. Lindsay looked around, trying to keep her composure, but when her eyes met Jack's, the familiar tension flooded back. He was as handsome as ever, but there was a coldness in his eyes that still made her heart ache. The sharp edge in his smile made her skin crawl. Jack hadn't changed. He still held on to that arrogance, that air of superiority that had made their marriage so difficult. As if he couldn't resist, he smirked and took a step toward her, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Lindsay," he said, drawing out her name like a challenge. "Still as beautiful as ever, I see. Too bad beauty fades, unlike certain memories." His words hit harder than any physical blow could. Lindsay's chest tightened, her breath catching in her throat. He had a way of making everything feel personal, as though every word was an attack, a reminder of their painful past. She forced herself to smile, though it felt strained and unnatural. "Jack," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "I didn't expect to see you here." He chuckled, the sound hollow. "Oh, you didn't expect me to show up at my own reunion? That's a first. I guess some things just never change." He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers, and for a brief moment, Lindsay wondered if he would do something more than just taunt her. But before she could think too much about it, there was a commotion at the other side of the room. The door opened, and a figure stepped into the banquet hall. It wasn't someone she recognized immediately, but the way everyone reacted told her this person was important. He moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. The crowd parted as he approached. Lindsay's heart skipped a beat when she saw him coming toward her. He was tall, well-dressed, and his presence commanded attention. There was something regal about him, an aura of authority that couldn't be ignored. When he reached her, he stopped and bowed his head slightly, as if acknowledging her in a way that no one else had. "Lindsay Adams," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I've come to remind you of your forgotten title." Lindsay's eyes widened, and for a moment she forgot about Jack standing just behind her. The words hit her like a wave, crashing over her with memories she thought she had buried long ago. Forgotten title? What was he talking about? Lindsay's mind raced as she tried to process the words the man had just spoken. Forgotten title? The words echoed in her head, but the meaning behind them seemed so foreign. She looked at the man in front of her, his eyes calm yet intense, as if he were waiting for her to understand something that was already well known to him. She swallowed hard, trying to push aside the shock. What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, though she tried to keep it steady. The man straightened, his expression becoming more serious. "You were once more than just a name, Lindsay Adams. You held a title that was given to you by your lineage. A title that has been forgotten by most, including yourself, but one that still holds power." Lindsay felt her knees weaken. She tried to grasp the reality of what he was saying. She had no idea what he was talking about. Her past, especially her family history, had always been something she kept at arm's length. After everything that happened with Jack and the divorce, Lindsay had chosen to leave her past behind. She had built a new life from scratch, one that didn't involve titles or any sort of aristocracy. But now, standing in front of this stranger, it seemed that her past was forcing its way back into her life whether she wanted it or not. "Who are you?" Lindsay finally managed to ask, her voice still shaky but more determined. The man's gaze softened slightly, but the firmness in his tone remained. "My name is Gregory Harwood, and I've come to remind you of what you are. It is time for you to reclaim what was once yours." Lindsay felt a wave of confusion wash over her. She glanced back at Jack, who stood silently behind her, his face unreadable. He had been watching the interaction with an expression that was difficult to decipher. Was it curiosity, concern, or perhaps even disbelief? Jack had always been so focused on his own world, on the career he had built, that she couldn't imagine him understanding what was happening now. But then again, Jack never understood the things that truly mattered to her. "I don't want this," Lindsay said, her words firm now, though the uncertainty still lingered in her chest. "I moved on. I have nothing to do with whatever title you're talking about." Gregory's expression didn't change, but Lindsay could see a flicker of understanding in his eyes, as if he had expected her reaction. "You may think that, but the truth is different. That title is part of you, whether you want it or not. And it's time to face it." Lindsay felt a strange pull, as if the gravity of Gregory's words was forcing her to confront something deep within herself. But she wasn't ready. She wasn't ready to revisit that part of her past, the part of her that she had worked so hard to forget. Jack, noticing the shift in Lindsay's demeanor, finally spoke up, his voice cutting through the silence. "This is ridiculous, Lindsay," he said, his voice low but sharp. "You've been fine without all of this. Why go back to it now? Why drag yourself through this?" His words stung, reminding Lindsay of the resentment that had festered between them for years. But as much as she wanted to snap back at him, she couldn't. She wasn't sure if she was angry with Jack, with Gregory, or with herself. There was too much swirling in her mind to make sense of it all. The room seemed to close in on her, the faces of old acquaintances watching her with silent curiosity, their eyes filled with unspoken questions. She wanted to escape, to run away from it all, but there was no escape from the truth. Not now. Not when Gregory was standing right in front of her, his presence undeniable. She felt a deep sense of unease settling over her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. It was as if her past, a past she thought she had buried, was reaching out to her, pulling her back into a life she had long since left behind. She had to make a decision, and she had to make it soon. Was she ready to face the life she had left behind? Or would she continue to ignore it, to pretend it didn't matter? The silence between them stretched on, and for the first time in a long time, Lindsay felt a weight on her shoulders that she couldn't shake. Lindsay's heart pounded in her chest as Gregory's words sank deeper into her mind. "It's time to face it," he had said. But was she ready to face something so old, something she had buried for so long? The tension in the room was palpable, thick with unanswered questions. She looked around at the faces of old friends, acquaintances from her past, each of them watching her, some with curiosity, others with pity. They didn't understand. How could they? They had no idea what she had been through, what she had left behind when she walked away from that life. Jack stood there, silent for once, his eyes fixed on her, but there was something different in them. His usual smirk had disappeared, replaced by an unreadable expression. Lindsay couldn't help but wonder if he even cared about what she was going through. They had been married for years, but Jack had always been more focused on his own ambitions than on her. Now, he was silent, distant. She couldn't help but feel a pang of bitterness. "I don't need this," she said, her voice shaky but determined. "I don't need to be reminded of a past I've already let go of." Gregory's gaze softened, but there was a quiet strength in it, as if he knew something she didn't. "You think you've let it go, Lindsay, but the truth has a way of coming back. You can't escape your history, no matter how hard you try." Lindsay clenched her fists at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him that he was wrong, that she had built a life for herself. A life without titles, without the weight of her family's expectations. But something in his voice, something in the way he spoke, made her hesitate. Maybe there was truth to his words. She had spent so many years running from her past, trying to forget who she was, what she had been. But now, standing in front of Gregory, it felt like the past was reaching out to her, dragging her back into a world she had left behind. Jack finally spoke, breaking the silence. Lindsay, you don't have to listen to this nonsense, he said, his voice low and tense. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Lindsay looked at Jack, her eyes searching his face for any sign of understanding, but all she saw was frustration. He wasn't helping. He never had. Jack, just leave it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She couldn't deal with him right now. She couldn't deal with any of this. Gregory stepped closer to her, his presence overwhelming. You can't run from this, Lindsay. The title belongs to you, and it's time you accepted that. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Lindsay took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She didn't want to face this, not now, not here. But there was no escaping it. Why now? She asked, her voice quiet but filled with a mixture of confusion and anger. Why come to me now, after all these years? Gregory's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something, regret perhaps, behind his eyes. Because the time has come. Your past has caught up with you, whether you want it to or not. Lindsay felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She wanted to deny it, to reject everything Gregory was saying, but a part of her knew he was right. Her past had a way of creeping back, even when she least expected it. She had tried to leave it behind, to move forward, but it seemed like the past was determined to drag her back. Jack watched her closely, as if waiting for her to make a decision. But what decision was there to make? How could she choose between the life she had built and the life she had left behind? The weight of her past pressed down on her, suffocating her, and for a moment she felt like she couldn't breathe. The past and the present collided in her mind, and all she could do was stand there, frozen. It was as if everything had come to a head, and she couldn't turn back now. The tension in the room was unbearable, and Lindsay felt like she was being pulled in two directions at once. She wanted to scream, to run, but the past wouldn't let her go. Not now. Not ever. Lindsay stood frozen, the weight of Gregory's words pressing down on her chest, suffocating her with every passing second. The room felt smaller now, the voices of old friends and acquaintances fading into the background as her mind spiraled. She couldn't believe this was happening. She had thought that part of her life was long gone, buried beneath years of pain and regret. But here it was, creeping back in like an unwelcome shadow, threatening to drag her back into a world she had fought so hard to escape. Why? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Why me? Why now? Gregory's expression remained unchanged, calm and unwavering. Because you can't outrun who you are, Lindsay. That title is yours by blood, by birth. It's a part of you, no matter how much you try to deny it. Lindsay's heart clenched. She had spent so many years trying to forget the life she had once known, the world of wealth and influence, the expectations of her family, the title that had come with it all. She had walked away from all of it when she left her old life behind, choosing instead a life of simplicity, free from the constraints that had once bound her. But now, standing in front of Gregory, it seemed like that life wasn't as far away as she had hoped. Jack, who had been eerily quiet until now, finally spoke up. This is insane, he muttered, shaking his head. You don't have to listen to him, Lindsay. He doesn't know what he's talking about. His voice was low, but there was an edge to it, a tinge of frustration that Lindsay couldn't ignore. She glanced at him, meeting his eyes for a moment, but quickly looked away. Jack had never understood her. Not really. He had always been wrapped up in his own world, in his own ambition. When they were together, he had never seen her for who she truly was, just a woman to stand beside him, nothing more. She had always been more than that, but he never seemed to realize it. Now, even as they stood together in this moment, Jack's words felt empty. Jack, this isn't about you, Lindsay said softly, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. This is about me. And whether I want to face my past or not. Jack's brow furrowed in confusion. Lindsay, what are you saying? You don't need to deal with any of this. It's all just a distraction. Forget about it. Lindsay shook her head slowly. I can't, she whispered. I can't just forget. Gregory watched the exchange between them, his eyes calm but knowing, as if he understood the battle Lindsay was fighting within herself. You've been running for a long time, Lindsay, he said, his voice still firm. But it's time to stop. It's time to face who you are, to accept what's been yours all along. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Lindsay felt a knot form in her stomach. She had tried so hard to build a life that was separate from the past, a life that didn't include the title, the expectations, or the family that had once seemed so suffocating. But now, it felt like all of that was coming back to her, demanding to be acknowledged. She didn't know if she was ready for it. She didn't know if she ever would be. Her thoughts were a tangled mess of confusion and fear, but one thing was clear. Her past had a way of catching up to her, no matter how far she tried to run. And now, standing here with Gregory's words still ringing in her ears, she realized there was no running anymore. Not from the title. Not from who she had been. And certainly not from the life that still called to her from the shadows of the past. Lindsay felt like she was suffocating under the weight of everything that was happening. The words that Gregory had said kept replaying in her mind, each time carrying more weight. It's time to face it. It's part of you. The past she had long buried, the life she had carefully built without it, seemed to be unraveling right in front of her. She could feel the tension in the air, the eyes of everyone at the banquet watching her, and the uncomfortable silence that hung between her and Jack. Jack, who had once been everything to her, was now standing there, distant, confused, and unable to understand what was happening. Lindsay looked at him, trying to find any hint of the man she had once loved, but all she saw now was someone who couldn't see her for who she truly was. She had always been more than just Jack's wife. But he never realized it. He never understood the woman behind the title, behind the image. And now, standing here with Gregory's words hanging over her, Lindsay couldn't help but feel the distance between them grow wider. She had always known that Jack was wrapped up in his own ambitions, his own world, but now it felt like that world was a million miles away from hers. He hadn't been there when she needed him most. And now, when she was being forced to confront the past she had left behind, he still didn't understand. Lindsay, Jack finally spoke, his voice breaking the silence. His tone was softer now, but there was still a hint of frustration in it. You don't need to do this. You don't need to go back to this. It doesn't matter. You have a life here, with me. You don't need to deal with whatever this guy is saying. Lindsay felt her chest tighten at his words. She had spent years trying to move forward, trying to escape the life that had once defined her. But it was clear now that no matter how far she ran, the past would always find a way back. She had tried to bury it, to pretend it didn't matter, but it was a part of her. It always had been. She looked at Gregory, her eyes filled with a mix of confusion and anger. I don't want this, she said, her voice shaking. I don't want anything to do with it. Gregory didn't flinch. His expression remained calm, almost pitying. You may not want it, Lindsay, but it's part of you. You can't escape it. Not anymore. The finality in his words sent a chill down her spine. She had spent so many years pretending that the past was behind her, that she was free. But now, standing here in this room, with Gregory's words echoing in her mind, it felt like everything was coming back to claim her. Jack's eyes flickered with uncertainty. What are you saying, Lindsay? He asked, his voice tinged with worry. You're not seriously considering this, are you? Lindsay didn't know how to respond. Part of her wanted to tell him to stop, to tell him that he didn't understand, that she needed to do this for herself. But the other part of her felt like she was being torn in two. She had worked so hard to build a life that was hers, separate from her family's expectations, separate from the title that had once defined her. But now, it felt like she was standing at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take. Gregory's words echoed in her ears, reminding her that there was no running from the past. The past was a part of her, whether she liked it or not. And now, it was time to face it. I don't know what to do, Lindsay whispered, her voice barely audible. She felt a tear slip down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. She had never felt so vulnerable, so unsure of herself. Her entire life had been a carefully constructed facade, but now, with Gregory's presence, it all seemed to be falling apart. The room seemed to close in on her, the voices of the banquet guests a blur in the background. She couldn't focus on anything except the decision that lay in front of her. Could she continue to deny her past, or was it time to embrace it, to face the woman she had once been? Jack was still watching her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, she wondered if he cared, if he even understood the depth of what she was facing. But the truth was, she didn't know if he ever would. And for the first time in a long time, Lindsay realized that the only person who could make this decision was her. The weight of it all was suffocating, but the decision was hers to make. There was no turning back now. Lindsay took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, but the weight of the moment felt heavier than she had ever imagined. Her entire life seemed to be hanging in the balance, suspended between the past she had left behind and the future she had built for herself. She could feel her pulse pounding in her ears as she tried to make sense of everything. The silence between her and Jack was deafening. She glanced over at him, his face still unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something she couldn't quite place. Was it concern? Was it regret? Or was it just confusion, the same confusion that had always been there when it came to her? Jack had never really understood her. Not fully. He had never understood why she had wanted to escape her family's expectations, why she had left behind a life of wealth and status. To him, it had always been about what was in front of him, his career, his image, his ambitions. He had never seen her for who she truly was, the woman behind the title, behind the carefully crafted image. Now, standing here, she realized how far apart they had grown. She had spent years trying to bury her past, trying to forget the title, the legacy that had once defined her. But as much as she tried to push it all away, it was still there, lurking just beneath the surface. And now, with Gregory standing in front of her, demanding that she face it, there was no escaping it. She had no idea what to do. Lindsay. Gregory's voice broke through her thoughts, calm and steady. You can't run from who you are. This title is yours, and it's time for you to embrace it. His words were like a slap to her face, but they were also a truth she couldn't deny. The title was hers, whether she liked it or not. She had tried to reject it, to build a life without it, but it was still a part of her, embedded in her blood, in her family's history. She could try to ignore it all she wanted, but it would never truly go away. She closed her eyes, trying to push the thoughts away, but they only grew louder. The life she had built for herself, the one she had worked so hard to create, suddenly felt fragile, like it could all come crashing down in an instant. I don't want this, she whispered, her voice shaky but firm. I don't want to go back to that life. I don't want to be defined by that title anymore. Gregory's gaze didn't falter. You don't get to choose, Lindsay. It's who you are. And sooner or later you will have to accept it. Lindsay felt the sting of his words deep inside her. She had always believed that she could control her own destiny, that she could choose who she wanted to be. But now, standing here, it felt like that choice was being taken away from her. She felt trapped, as if she was being pulled in two directions at once, one towards the life she had chosen, and the other back to a past she had long since rejected. She looked at Jack again, her eyes searching his face, hoping to find some kind of reassurance, some sign that he understood, that he would stand by her. But all she saw was uncertainty, the same uncertainty that had always been there. What do you want me to do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What am I supposed to do? Jack didn't answer right away, but after a long pause he finally spoke, his voice softer than before. Lindsay, I don't know what to tell you. I don't understand this. But whatever you decide, I'll be here. His words were meant to comfort her, but they only made her feel more alone. How could he be there for her when he didn't even understand the battle she was fighting? How could he stand by her when he didn't even see the person she truly was? Lindsay didn't know if she could continue living in a world where she had to choose between the woman she had become and the woman she had been. The decision was hers to make, but the weight of it felt unbearable. Could she embrace her past, accept the title that had once defined her, and move forward? Or would she walk away from it all, choosing the life she had built over the one that had always been expected of her? She didn't know the answer, but for the first time, she realized that she couldn't hide from it any longer. Lindsay's mind was racing, caught between two impossible choices. The weight of Gregory's words still lingered, echoing in her mind. It's part of you. You can't escape it. She had always believed she could control her own fate, that she could carve out a life that was truly hers, free from the expectations and the legacy of her family. But now, standing in this room, with Jack's confused gaze upon her and Gregory's unwavering presence, she felt more trapped than ever. The decision felt impossible. She couldn't simply walk away from everything she had built, everything she had worked so hard for. But neither could she ignore the pull of her past, the pull of the title that had once been hers and still seemed to haunt her. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, but nothing about this moment felt steady. Everything felt fragile, as if it could shatter at any moment. Her thoughts kept returning to Jack. What did he want from her? He had always been there in some form, standing beside her, but always distant, never truly understanding what she needed. She had hoped that by moving away from her family, by choosing a life of independence, she could escape the part of herself that Jack had never truly seen. But now, with him standing there, his silence louder than any words, she realized how far apart they had truly grown. She couldn't rely on him to make this decision for her. He had never been able to truly see her. It wasn't that he didn't care, it was that he couldn't understand the weight of what she was carrying. Her past, her title, her family, all of it had been so far removed from him. They had always been two worlds, and now, standing on the edge of this decision, Lindsay wondered if they could ever be one. She shifted her gaze back to Gregory, feeling a surge of frustration. I don't want this, she said again, her voice steadier now. I've worked so hard to build something new. I can't just throw it all away. Gregory's expression didn't change. You don't have to throw it away. But you do have to acknowledge it. You can't keep pretending it doesn't exist. The simplicity of his words made her want to scream. She had spent years pushing her past away, pretending it didn't matter, pretending she could be someone else. But no matter how hard she tried, it had always been there, lingering at the edges of her consciousness. The title. The family. The life that had been mapped out for her before she ever had a chance to choose her own path. You're asking me to go back, Lindsay whispered, more to herself than to anyone in the room. You're asking me to become someone I don't even recognize anymore. Gregory's eyes softened, just for a moment, but there was no pity in them. Only understanding. I'm asking you to become who you truly are, Lindsay. To embrace all of who you are, not just the parts that are easy. The words hit her harder than she expected. To become who she truly was. That was the question she had been avoiding for so long. Who was she? Was she the woman who had left behind her family's expectations, the woman who had carved out a life on her own terms? Or was she the woman who had always been bound by those same expectations, shaped by the title and legacy that she couldn't escape? Jack's voice interrupted her thoughts, his tone urgent. Lindsay, please. Don't do this. Don't let him manipulate you. His words felt like a knife to her heart. She wasn't being manipulated. But it wasn't about him, and it wasn't about Gregory. It was about her. It was about the life she wanted to live, the person she wanted to be. She could no longer hide from that truth. She had to choose. But the choice was not as simple as turning her back on her past or embracing it. It was about reconciling the two, finding a way to merge the woman she had become with the woman she had been. That was the only way forward. And in that moment, Lindsay realized she wasn't ready to make that choice, not just yet. She needed time. Time to understand herself, to understand what this title truly meant to her, and what it meant for her future. She took a step back, her heart heavy with uncertainty. I don't know yet, she said quietly, her voice filled with exhaustion. But I will. I just need time to think. Gregory nodded, his expression still calm, but there was a flicker of respect in his eyes. Take all the time you need, he said softly. But remember, the past doesn't stay buried forever. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Lindsay alone with her thoughts and her decision, one that she knew would shape her future in ways she could never have anticipated. Lindsay stood there, alone in the midst of the swirling chaos of the banquet. The music played softly in the background, the chatter of guests around her seemed distant, almost like an echo. Her mind was racing, thoughts tumbling over one another, a storm of confusion and uncertainty. Gregory had left, his words still hanging in the air like a heavy fog. She had asked for time, but the weight of the decision seemed to follow her every step. She wasn't sure what she was supposed to do. Should she embrace her past, reclaim the title that had always been hers, or should she continue to push it away, maintaining the life she had built on her own terms? As she stood there, lost in thought, her gaze fell once again on Jack. He was standing by the door, his expression unreadable, but there was something in the way he held himself that made her heart ache. She had never felt so far apart from him, and yet, in this moment, it felt like they were still connected by an invisible thread. Jack had always been a part of her life, but now, she wasn't sure where he fit into the equation anymore. He had always been focused on his career, his ambitions, and she had chosen to move away from all of that. But now, she felt the pull of the past, and it was stronger than ever. She felt her chest tighten as she walked toward him, her steps slow and hesitant. She didn't know what to say, or if there was even anything left to say. "Jack," she whispered, her voice shaky. He turned to her, his eyes searching hers. There was a hint of something in his gaze, something that made her wonder if he understood the weight of what she was feeling. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft, but there was a note of concern in it that she hadn't heard before. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I don't know," she replied honestly, her voice quiet. "I don't know what to do anymore." Jack took a step closer to her, his presence somehow both comforting and unsettling at the same time. He reached out, his hand hovering uncertainly for a moment before resting lightly on her arm. "You don't have to figure it all out right now," he said gently. "Whatever you decide, I'll be here." His words, meant to offer comfort, only made her feel more conflicted. She wanted to believe him, to trust that he would be there for her no matter what. But she also knew that he couldn't understand. Not fully. He had never understood why she had chosen to leave behind everything she knew, why she had rejected the life that had been laid out for her. And now, as she faced the hardest decision of her life, she realized that even if Jack was here, he couldn't make the decision for her. She had to face this on her own. The weight of the past, of her family's expectations, of the title that had once been hers, was a burden that only she could carry. "I need to figure this out on my own," Lindsay said quietly, pulling away from Jack's touch. "I don't know what the right choice is, but I have to make it." Jack nodded, his expression softening with understanding, though there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I get it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." Lindsay turned away from him, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She wasn't sure if she was making the right choice, but she knew one thing for certain: she couldn't keep running from her past. Whether she embraced it or not, it was a part of who she was, and she couldn't ignore it any longer. As she walked away, Lindsay felt a deep sense of unease settle in her chest. The decision wasn't easy, and she didn't know if she was ready to face the woman she used to be. But as the night stretched on, she realized that it wasn't about being ready. It was about accepting who she was and choosing what kind of future she wanted to build. The past had a way of catching up to you, whether you liked it or not. And now, Lindsay knew she had to face it, no matter how difficult it might be. Lindsay stood at the edge of the balcony, the cool night air brushing against her face as she stared out at the city below. The lights shimmered in the distance, the quiet hum of the world below a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions raging inside her. She had asked for time, and time had passed, but the decision still loomed over her. The past was A shadow that refused to be ignored. She had tried to bury it, to leave it behind, but it had a way of finding its way back into her life when she least expected it. Gregory's words echoed in her mind, a reminder that the title, the legacy, the family name, it was all still there, still part of her. Could she simply walk away from it? Could she ignore the weight of the past and continue with the life she had built? The thought of returning to that world, of embracing the title that once defined her, filled her with dread. But the thought of rejecting it completely, of denying a part of who she was just as terrifying. Was it possible to reconcile both? Could she find a way to move forward without losing herself in the process? As she stood there, her thoughts a tangled mess, she couldn't help but think of Jack. He had been there for her, in his own way, but now, in this moment of crisis, she realized just how much he had never truly understood. He had always been part of her life, but he had never truly known her. The woman who had walked away from her family's wealth and expectations, the woman who had chosen a different path, Jack had never seen that woman. She had always been more than just his wife, but he hadn't understood that. And now, in this moment, it felt like the distance between them was too great to bridge. She had to make this decision on her own. She could no longer rely on him to tell her what to do or how to feel. The weight of the past, of her family's expectations, was something only she could carry. No one else could decide for her. It was her choice to make, and no one could take that away from her. The cold wind whipped through her hair, and for a moment she closed her eyes, trying to clear her mind. She thought of everything she had worked for, the life she had built, the independence she had fought so hard to maintain. And yet, there was a part of her that still felt tethered to the past, a part of her that couldn't shake the feeling that she was running from something that would always be a part of her. She had to make peace with that. She had to find a way to accept who she was, both the woman she had become and the woman she had been. With a deep breath, Lindsay opened her eyes and looked at the city again. It was beautiful, serene, and yet she knew it wouldn't offer the answers she sought. The answers weren't out there, in the distance or in the future. They were within her. She had to decide who she was, what kind of life she wanted to lead, and what parts of her past she was willing to accept. There was no easy answer, no quick fix. But for the first time, she felt a sense of clarity. She didn't have to make the decision today, and she didn't have to do it alone. She could take the time she needed, but she would not run from it any longer. Whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms. With that thought, Lindsay turned away from the balcony, the decision still looming, but now, it felt a little less heavy. She didn't have all the answers, but she was ready to start figuring them out. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe again.